Hey guys, it's Sensuki. In this video, I'm going to try and demonstrate to new players how to fight in combat in Pillars of Eternity. Now, I've noticed that recently on the forums and in a couple of YouTube videos and a bunch of other places, I've seen that people who are more of a casual gamer and aren't necessarily as familiar with the Infinity Engine games as I am, are claiming that Pillars of Eternity, its combat is really frustrating and it's just not fun. Now, those are both 2 points that I agree on. I don't find the combat in Pillars of Eternity that fun, and it is a bit frustrating as well. And there's a bunch of other reasons why I don't like it, but I'm making this video to try and help you be able to suffer through the combat. There's a couple of things that are really important, and I'm going to go through those in a minute when I get into combat. I've chosen the beetle encounters because many people are saying that the beetles are the ones that do them in all the time, so I'm going to demonstrate how to beat them. First, I haven't actually leveled up my character, so I'm going to do that now. I've chosen a Barbarian because Paladins are currently broken in version 333, and the Backer Beta party already contains most of the standard classes, so I figured I'll just pick a fairly easy class to play, which is the Barbarian. Actually, before I go into leveling up, I'll show you my character first. Okay, so here's my character record. Now, the first thing to pay attention to is stats. Now, a lot of people pick stats based on role-playing or what they think that that class should be good at, or maybe even the recommended attributes. Now, the recommended attributes aren't necessarily correct in a lot of places. There's a few things that the developers have ignored when picking recommended attributes, and the first one is that perception is the single most important attribute in the game at the moment, and because of how the attack resolution system works, it is very important that your character's actions are accurate, because you need, in order to be able to have an effect on enemies, you need to be able to hit with your spells. All spells follow the same rules, and they all have an attack roll, and that accuracy increases that attack roll. So that is why I max the perception attribute on every single character. Now, that's not necessarily required to max the attribute, but I would recommend at least putting it at 15 or something like that. Now, as a Barbarian, Barbarians are a melee class, and most of their abilities are melee ranged, so I expect that I'm going to be taking some damage as a Barbarian, so I put 15 points into Constitution, and I also want to be dealing damage as a Barbarian, so I put 15 points into Might, which gives me 10% extra damage and healing. Now, you can do a few different builds, and this is not like the best build ever, but it's like just a standard beginner's build in my opinion. Now that you also get to pick your starting abilities, you have a choice. I chose Carnage because it is a passive ability. It doesn't require you to do anything, and what Carnage does is when you attack it, it attacks other units in a close proximity to the unit you're attacking, so it's pretty much like an AoE attack. So now that I've done that, I'm going to level up my character. Now, another one of the current gotchas in the game is talent selection. Now, most of the talents here are not going to help a Barbarian. Now, you have the health healing talents here, which I don't think should be in the game, so I'm going to ignore them. Most of these other ones are very situational, and half of them are not going to work, or they're not helpful for a melee Barbarian. So the first thing that I would probably consider is either one of the Barbarian talents, which are represented by the Barbarian icon here, or one of the weapon-focused talents, because Barbarians are going to be spending most of their time attacking units in combat with their melee weapon. So that means that weapon focus is probably going to be the best choice. Now, currently, my Barbarian has a Morningstar equipped, and as you can see, the Morningstar is bugged. It's like transparent. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look through weapon focus and see which one affects the Morningstar. As you can see over on the right side of the screen, that weapon focus is grouped, and you have a bunch of different weapons in each group. So we're going to look for the Morningstar group, and that's this one, weapon focus Knight. Now, it doesn't say in the description because the developers haven't put in the actual values that it gives, but it gives plus 10 accuracy, which is as good as having 20 perception. So that is really good, and it's really going to help you hit with your attacks. So that's the reason why I'm going to choose that. I'm going to go to the next level. Okay, so now we're at level 3, and we get to pick our third ability. We have a choice of 3 abilities. We have Savage Defiance, which is an AoE attack, and it makes enemies frightened for 12 seconds as a base, and that's assuming that you hit with the ability. It can also be less if you graze, it can have no effect if you miss, and it can be longer if you crit. We have Savage Defiance, which is a healing ability, and we have Blooded, which gives us bonus damage when the Barbarian has less than 50% health. So having tried Barbaric Yell, Savage Defiance, and Blooded, in my opinion, I wouldn't pick Barbaric Yell at the moment in the game because it has a cast time, and I think that because Barbarians take damage, they need to be able to survive. They don't necessarily need to be able to cause the frightened effect against enemies, because that's something that one of the other classes can do, such as the Priest, because they'll be sitting back casting those types of spells. So in this situation, I'm going to probably lean on either Savage Defiance or Bloodied, and I think Savage Defiance might be the best pick for new players because it gives you healing, and that's something that the Barbarian needs in combat. Okay, so now we're up to our fourth talent. Now we've already picked the weapon focus, so we can't pick another one because we're using a Morning Star. So now we have to look at the other ones. Now there's 3 Barbarian talents here. There's one that makes our Savage Defiance better. So when we use Savage Defiance, it gives a defensive bonus to nearby allies. So that's not a bad choice. I think it gives plus 10 deflection, although it doesn't say in the description, which it should. Accurate Carnage gives plus 5 accuracy to all of our Carnage attacks. That's not a bad one either. I wouldn't really consider bonus Frenzy because when you cast Frenzy, it's not an instant cast. It takes a few seconds to charge up, and I think that its combat opening is really important. So I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. Maybe in the actual game when it's released, or later in the beta when they decide how to make Frenzy a bit more useful, it might be worth taking. But I don't think it is currently. So these 2 ones are good choices. Now, if we scroll down, we have the weapon style talents as well. So we're using a 2-handed weapon, and I don't think that currently the 2-handed weapon style is very good. It gives you plus 5 deflection, which isn't too bad. But Barbarians are an offensive class, and what I would recommend doing is picking something that increases your offensive ability. So that's not a bad choice. Like if you want a bit better deflection, that would be a good pick. But I'm going to go with Accurate Carnage. And now we have our level 5 ability, and as you can see, we have the 2 abilities from before, Barbaric Yell and Blooded, and now we have 2 more, Brute Force and Wild Sprint. Now, Wild Sprint allows you to move really quickly across the battlefield. I think it is a superfluous ability. It makes you easier to hit, but it makes you a bit... like if you get hit by a disengagement attack, it doesn't stop you. I don't really think it's a valuable ability at all, so I'm just going to completely ignore that. However, I really like Brute Force because if the enemy has a lower Fortitude score than Deflection, it will attack their Fortitude defense instead. That's a really good choice, so I'm going to pick that one. Okay, so the next thing that I would like to mention is that the Backer Beta party doesn't necessarily have the most optimal gear selection. I'll open the inventory. Now the first thing that I want to point out is wizards equipped in heavy armor is a very, very bad idea. Now the developers wanted to showcase the fact that wizards could use armor in the beta, but it is not really a good choice for wizards to do unless you're in melee combat, or you're up against an enemy that does ridiculous AoE damage. So the first thing I would recommend doing is removing the armor from the wizard and actually having no armor on the wizard, because this allows him to cast spells faster. The breastplate slows his cast speed down by 40%, which is not good. So even though it protects you more, you're better off using positioning and making sure that the wizard isn't getting hit by enemies than equipping him in armor. So I would just take the armor off the wizard. Now for the rogue, you can do the same thing. The rogue is currently equipped in fine padded armor. If you're using a ranged weapon, I would recommend removing the armor from the rogue. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove the armor. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the arbalist from the fighter, and I'm going to give it to the rogue instead, because currently bows are not very good. They're very bad against enemies with high armor. Arbalists are very good against enemies with high armor. So I'm going to equip the rogue with the arbalist. The priest is another character that doesn't really need the heaviest armor that she's got. She's wearing fine mail armor, which reduces her cast speed by 45%. That's not great. So we're going to take that off, and we're going to equip the priest with the fine padded armor instead, which only reduces it by 20%. But if she does get attacked, it still protects her a little bit. So that's one option. Now, the other thing I would recommend doing is considering whether you want the fighter to have a shield or not. The fighter is currently equipped with a battle axe, which is only good when you've got a high accuracy. So what I would recommend doing is not using that, and also not equipping the shield. Now, the priest has a large shield over here and a morning star. Now, what I've been doing is I've been equipping with the fighter with the morning star, so that he does more damage, because the fighter character has 22 might, which means he does quite a bit of damage, so that's a good option. The other thing you could also do is equip the fighter with the large shield, which gives him a higher deflection. As you can see, it puts it up to 71. So you could give him a battle axe, or you could use the wizard's sword, which he's not using here. That's probably a better option against most enemies at the moment. So we could give the fighter a sword and shield if we want, and that makes him harder to hit. Or we could equip him with Morning Star, which is what I'm going to do, and that will make him do more damage. So now we've optimized our gear a little bit. I'll just make sure that I equip the priest with the Warhammer, so she's actually got something. I think we're ready to face the beetles. Okay, so now the beetles have been moved in the current patch to different spots, so we're going to fight the group up the top. Now, there's a couple of things that I would recommend considering here. Number one is using stealth before you enter the battle, because that gives you an advantage over the enemy. So if you press the left alt key, you can move into stealth, and then you can see enemies before they can see you. So that will give you an advantage over the enemy and allow you to set up on them. So that is a valid option to enter combat, and that's what I'm going to do here. So now, as you can see, I'm moving around in stealth, and we've now spotted that there are 3 beetles here. Now, there's another one up further, I think. So we have the advantage over the beetles here because we can open up combat. Now, this beetle's probably going to see my character, so the thing that I've done immediately is pause the game. It is very important in Pillars of Eternity that you open combat and you have a strong opening. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you issue commands to all 5 of your characters before you unpause the game. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my rogue, and I'm going to turn on the rogue's modal ability, which makes the rogue more accurate and do more damage, but it decreases their deflection. Now, we're going to use positioning to make sure that the rogue pretty much is protected from melee. So we're going to turn that on, and we're not going to issue the rogue an attack first, because currently enemies in the beta attack the unit that attacks them first, or they change targets when they're engaged. So that's the only 2 targeting clauses they have. So we're not going to open with the rogue to begin with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cast a Noxious Burst with the wizard on these beetles if I can hit them. So we're just going to move these guys back. Okay, so now that I've cast Noxious Burst and you see the damage numbers here over on the screen, I'm going to pause the game instantly again, because it is very important that you do not waste time in combat, and every second that you waste in combat is time that is lost that your characters could be performing something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my fighter comes in and attacks that beetle. And I'm going to queue up a crippling strike with the rogue, because it is very important that you open combat strongly, and that gives you a significant advantage against the enemy. Using crippling strike gives me more damage, and it causes the hobbling effect against an enemy. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it on this stone beetle. Now, with the priest, I've found that the interdiction ability, because you can use it every encounter, is very good to open with, because it dazes the enemies for 8.8 seconds. The base effect is 7, so I'm going to cast that, and I'm going to try and hit all of them. Now, the other thing is I've got my Barbarian, so I'm going to send my Barbarian in here as well. Now, I could either attack this one or this one, so I think I might actually attack that one. Now, the only thing I haven't done here is queued the wizard another action. So he is now finished casting his spell, so I can now queue up something else. So what have I got here? Let's mouse over the beetle. So we can see that the beetle has 7 DT and 28 fortitude. We're not sure about this one. So what we might do is we'll open up with a damaging spell that's single target. So you've got a couple of choices. Minoletter's Minor Missiles and Jolting Touch. So we're going to cast Jolting Touch against that enemy. Now I'm okay to unpause because I've issued a command to every character. So I'm going to unpause. Okay, so now that people have executed their actions, I've paused again because currently in Pillars of Eternity, it is important to make sure that you have actions queued up all the time and you don't waste any seconds in combat. So now, that's why I'm going to pause quickly again. Okay, so now the fighter's auto-attacking there, the priest's action is done, the wizard's action hasn't quite finished yet, and the rogue is reloading. So we need to issue the priest another command. Now, before we do that, we'll have a look at what's going on. As we can see down here, the fighter is now poisoned. So what I could do here is I could try and alleviate the poison effect from the fighter, and there's a couple of ways you can do that. The best way is to cast the Suppress Affliction spell, which suspends hostile effects for 6 seconds. So I could do that and cast that on the fighter. The other option is I could heal him, but I'm going to use Suppress Affliction instead. So now I'm pretty much right. Now one tactical mistake I've made is that the Barbarian is better at attacking groups of enemies. So what I should have done is had the fighter attack the Stone Beetle and the Barbarian attack the Wood Beetle. So that's a tactical mistake I've made. I'm sorry about that, but I've pointed it out. So now everyone is doing something again in combat, so I'm okay to unpause. So now we've seen that this Wood Beetle here is targeting the Wizard. Now I need to do something about that because the Wizard doesn't have much health and he's not wearing any armor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe switch the rogue to melee weapons. And I'm going to have to cancel the reload as well. So I'm press the cancel key, X, and the Wizard is casting a Jolting Touch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the Arcane Bale ability, and that protects the Wizard from attacks against deflection for 9.5 seconds. The Wood Beetle's attack is against deflection. Well, their base attack is anyway. I think poison attacks fortitude. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cue the action. I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to press Arcane Veil. So now I think I'm okay to keep going. Okay, so the one Wood Beetle's gone down. Now the fighter is attacking the Wood Beetle. Now what I can do here with the fighter is use the knockdown ability. So then that beetle will be disabled for a base of 5 seconds. And I'm going to select the rogue to crippling strike the Wood Beetle as well. As we can see, my Barbarian over here is fine against the Stone Beetle. She hasn't been hit yet. Okay, so that beetle has now been killed by the Shocking Grasp. So now there's only one beetle left. Okay, so I'm going to select my fighter and I'm going to attack the beetle. Now, what I could do here is I could switch back to the Arbalist as the rogue, or I could walk up and attack in melee. So either way, it doesn't really matter. So I think I'm going to switch back to the Arbalist, and I'm just going to right-click. Because this enemy is going to die in a second, you don't really need to waste any more per-day spells. So I'm just going to auto-attack now. Now I'm going to select the rogue to attack as well. So she's got a reload. Now, I've also got a few per encounters left. I've got the fighter's knockdown, which he hasn't used yet, so I can use that to knock down the Stone Beetle. Now the Stone Beetle's knocked down, so that Stone Beetle's disabled for the remainder of the fight, and it'll be dead in a sec. Okay, so I've beaten the beetles. I made one tactical error, and I've taken a little bit of damage, but as you can see, I haven't died. None of my party members were seriously threatened, and I controlled the battle from start to finish. Now, the most important thing for new players is to remember is to pause the game at the start of combat, issue actions to all of your characters, and then keep pausing once characters' actions have completed. So you have to pay attention to the recovery bars, and when the character's icon in the combat HUD is empty, you need to issue them a new command. You can use the pause function, and there's also a slow function. So if you press S, you notice that my character is moving very slowly. Now, the slow function was put in to alleviate the pausing. So you can use slow or you can use pause. Either way, it should be fine. But yes, currently the game requires too much pausing. There's too much emphasis on the combat opening and the combat is fast, but hopefully this video was helpful and hopefully you'll be able to use the tactics and the methods that I have described here to be able to find Pillars of Eternity combat a bit easier. Thanks for watching, guys, and look forward to the next video in this series.